George Harrison is often described as the quiet Beatle, but in reality, he was soulful, spiritual, and as Ringo says, never suffered fools. As the youngest Beatle, George proved himself to be one of the greatest musicians to ever live. Today, we're going to show you 10 very interesting facts about the phenomenal George Harrison. Let's begin. During the recording of Abbey Road, while George Harrison was busy in the control room, he noticed Yoko Ono moved from her double bed and slowly make her way across the studio floor. George saw her stop at his Leslie cabinet amplifier where he had placed a packet of McVitie's digestive biscuits. To George's shock, Yoko opened the packet and removed a single biscuit, and just as she put the biscuit in her mouth, George hollered, "That bitch! She's just taken one of my biscuits!" John Lennon quickly stood up to defend his wife, and George and him began a shouting match. But at this point in the Beatles, arguments weren't out of the ordinary since tensions were so high. But really, one should never steal George Harrison's biscuits. On December 30th, 1999, at approximately 3:30 in the morning, Michael Abram, a 33-year-old Liverpudlian, scaled the fence of George's Friar Park estate and smashed a window with a nearby statue. George, awoken by the clamor, rushed towards the sound and confronted the intruder. The maniac was screaming while pursuing George with a knife. George ran at him courageously, attempting to disarm him, but he couldn't subdue the attacker, and Michael Abrams stabbed George in the chest repeatedly. His wife Olivia rushed to his aid by striking Michael Abram with a lamp, which made him drop his knife. After a tussle, the police arrived and apprehended the lunatic, and George eventually recovered in the hospital. Michael Abrams claimed that he believed the Beatles were witches who flew around on broomsticks, so he did what he did because he thought George was the devil. Talk about crazy. George's first time with a woman was in Hamburg, Germany, where the Beatles often played in the early 60s. George recalls that fateful day by saying, "My first shag was in Hamburg, with Paul and John and Pete Best, all watching. We were in bunk beds. They couldn't really see anything because I was under the covers, but after I'd finished, they all applauded and cheered. At least they kept quiet while I was doing it." According to the director of the Beatles' first two films, Richard Lester, who directed both A Hard Day's Night and Help, named George as the best actor of the foursome. According to Lester in A Hard Day's Night, George, quote-unquote, nailed every line. Speaking of acting, George was such a big fan of Monty Python that when EMI decided to not fund their upcoming movie, Life of Brian, George remortgaged his mansion and arranged a loan for a whopping $5 million. When asked why he did such a drastic investment, George responded, "Because I want to see it. Not many people would pay $5 million for an admission ticket." George was quite the prankster, and one of the most remarkable pranks he performed was on none other than the great Phil Collins. George was about to release a remaster of All Things Must Pass in 2001, where the then unknown Phil Collins had played congas on in 1970 when he was just 18. But what Phil didn't know is George had a trick up his sleeve. This is what Phil says when George sent him the joke version of the song. "I got a tape from George of the song that I had played with the congas quite loud. I thought, oh my God, this sounds terrible. In fact, it was a Harrison joke. He recorded percussionist Ray Cooper and said to him to play it bad. I'm going to record it and send it to Phil. I couldn't believe that a Beatle had actually spent that much time on a practical joke for me." George has been a longtime fan of fast cars, racing, and Formula One since he was a child. After the Beatles broke up, he was finally able to indulge in his passion for racing that would have been impossible while they were together. He hosted parties for drivers at his estate after the British Grand Prix, drove Stirling Moss's Lotus 18 Formula One car, and in the early 90s purchased one of the first McLaren F1 supercars ever built. In 1977, astronomer and science popularizer Carl Sagan tried his very best to get George Harrison's Here Comes the Sun included on a golden record that would be sent off into space in the Voyager space mission, to showcase the very best humanity had to offer in terms of art to whoever or whatever might find it. It is said that the Beatles loved the idea, but because they tragically did not own the rights to their own music, they were unable to risk it. Personally, I think it's a real shame a Beatles song isn't on that spaceship. 2 weeks before George's passing from cancer, his doctor, Gilbert Letterman, brought his 12-year-old son to George's home when he was receiving treatment and forced George to sign his son's guitar. George was exhausted and responded, "I do not know if I know how to spell my name anymore." But the doctor persisted, and eventually got the autograph. George's family sued the doctor and disposed of the ill-gotten autographed guitar. George Harrison was an avid gardener and once said, "For the forest to be green, each tree must be green." So after his passing, a pine tree was planted in a memorial to him in Griffith Park, Los Angeles. But ironically, the tree perished due to an infestation of, wait for it, beetles. The tree has since been replaced, and keeping in mind what we know about George, maybe Beatles eating a Beatles tree was a little practical joke. Well, that's all for today, everyone. Let us know your favorite George Harrison facts in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and special thanks to contributing author Leah Robbins. Be sure to check out some of our other videos on music, such as Why Did Freddie Mercury Write Bohemian Rhapsody?, the story behind Toto's Africa, and if you're a Beatles fan, well, let's just say this is your channel. Thanks to the amazing patrons who keep this channel alive, and if you're into super underground music, then definitely check out the HollyHobs on Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere music is streamed. If you want to be notified when new videos are out, at this point you'll have to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and pray that YouTube will recommend anything you actually might want to see. If you have an idea for a video, please be sure to leave a comment. See you next time.